This is Bone Chillers to disturb your dreams. Dare to join us? Click subscribe, ring the bell. But remember, we cannot guarantee your safety from the nightmares that await. Prepare to be thrilled, chilled, and filled with a sense of dread you'll find nowhere else. Welcome to the darkness. We've been waiting.
The Echoing Shadows.
My ordinary life went awry on a sunny Tuesday afternoon when my shadow first disobeyed me. As I lazily stirred my coffee in the solitude of my kitchen, the dark silhouette imitating me halted its circular motion, instead slicing through the air with a slashing motion. I shivered, brushed it off as a trick of the light, and continued with my day. But it was just the beginning. The second anomaly happened in the park. My friends laughed, oblivious to the unnerving oddity as my shadow's throw of the frisbee sliced through a nearby tree, cleaving it in half. My heart pounded as I silently witnessed the impossible act, my mind spinning with disbelief. Day by day, my shadow grew bolder, stronger. It knocked over vases, broke picture frames, but no one else seemed to see. The world around me was being affected, but only I seemed privy to the spectral hands at work. The realm of darkness had started intruding upon reality, and I was the only witness. A week later, the incidents escalated. My shadow, now a separate entity, ceased mimicking me entirely. Instead, it roamed about the house in the night, shattering objects and leaving chaos in its wake. Every morning, I awoke to a new mess, shards of my life strewn across the floor. Then came the night when I awoke to a strangled cry. My own voice. I shot up, heart hammering, and saw my shadow choking an invisible version of me. I ran for the lights, praying the brightness would banish my unwelcome silhouette. But the haunting image of myself being strangled by my own darkness stayed with me. I started sleeping with the lights on. The following day, I visited a psychologist, hoping for a logical explanation. Perhaps a hidden mental illness, I thought. But as I sat in the bright office, talking about the strange occurrences, my shadow snaked across the carpet, wrapping around the doctor's. It twisted violently, and the man suddenly crumpled over, clutching his chest. Heart attack, the ambulance personnel declared. I knew better. A chill crawled up my spine. My shadow was now not just destructive but deadly. Days turned into a blur of fear. Every action my shadow took became more ominous, more lethal. It slashed at strangers on the street, causing unseen injuries. I could see their sudden flinches of pain, their confusion at the source of their suffering. And I watched, horrified, unable to intervene. Out of desperation, I decided to confront my shadow. I switched off the lights, let the full moon's glow filter into my living room. As the dark figure appeared on the wall, I stepped forward. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. To my surprise, it responded. Not with a voice, but with an unnerving mimicry of me. My failures, my losses, my guilt, all mirrored back with a painful clarity. The twisted actions were not random, but reflections of my own darkest thoughts, fears, and regrets. A shadowy confession. Suddenly, I understood. This wasn't an external entity. This was my subconscious, my own hidden darkness given form. The only way to stop it was to confront my internal demons, my unaddressed sins. So, I embarked on a journey of introspection. Each night, I confronted my shadow, delving deep into my past, confronting guilt and remorse, making amends where I could, forgiving myself where I couldn't. The shadow watched, its once violent actions slowly calming. After weeks of self-reflection and reconciliation, the shadow's violent behavior ceased. One morning, I woke up and my shadow was ordinary again. It returned to its old nature, a mimic, a harmless echo of my actions. The choking fear subsided, replaced with a hard-won peace. I've learned the shadow doesn't just follow you, it reflects you. The darkness wasn't some separate entity, but a part of me, my fears, regrets, and guilt. To defeat it, I had to confront myself. The echoing shadows still lurk around, unnoticed by others, but always seen by me. A reminder of the darkness we carry within and the importance of shedding light on it before it consumes us. Faceless friend. I met them on an esoteric forum dedicated to metaphysical sciences, ancient religions, and the like. Their username was simply Anon83. Their charm, intellect, and deep understanding of subjects that piqued my curiosity made us fast friends. Anon83 never shared personal information. Their voice, when we finally decided to voice chat, was artificial, a text-to-speech program. We shared countless hours discussing astral planes, quantum realities, but never once did we discuss our personal lives. As our friendship blossomed, so did my curiosity. I decided to meet Anon83, to attach a human face to this fascinating intellect. Despite their protests, I insisted. They finally agreed, and we decided to meet in a derelict park, at dusk. The day arrived. I walked along the forgotten paths of the park, a strange chill dancing along my spine. I waited on a rusty bench under an ancient willow. Then I saw it, a figure, appearing from the misty gloom. Walking towards me, they had an eerily familiar gait. A sense of déjà vu washed over me as they came into clearer view. My blood froze. It was me, exactly, in appearance and attire. But their face was a smooth, featureless expanse of skin, no eyes, nose, or mouth, just the contours of where they should be. My breath hitched in my throat, my heart pounded against my ribs, yet I couldn't tear my gaze away from the horror mirroring me. It extended a hand, a gesture of greeting. The voice that emanated from it was the same artificial tone I knew from our chats. "Hello, friend. I am Anon83." The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body betrayed me, remaining frozen in place. "Why do you look like me?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "Because I am an echo of you. A possibility unrealized, a reflection from another reality." The voice was cold, emotionless, sending shivers down my spine. "And I yearn to be whole." "Whole?" I echoed, feeling a strange pull towards this faceless being. Yes, to regain my face. To exist as more than an echo. I need a conduit to this reality, a tether. You. My mind raced, piecing together the fragmented absurdity. My interest in the arcane, the metaphysical had drawn me into a dangerous reality. Was I staring at an entity from another plane of existence, one that yearned for solidity, using my identity as an anchor? But how? I asked, my voice a mere croak, a simple transference of energy. "It won't hurt," it said, extending a hand towards me. Its smooth, faceless head tilted in an eerily familiar way, the way I often did when in deep thought. Fear turned into a morbid curiosity. A part of me was entranced by this creature, this mirror of myself. The absurdity of it all left me paralyzed, incapable of deciding what was wise, what was dangerous. "No. I don't want this," I stammered, my sanity finally intervening. Its shoulders slumped, mirroring a sense of disappointment that I often displayed. "There's no other way," it said. The faceless being lunged at me, its fingers cold as they wrapped around my wrist. An agonizing pulse of energy coursed through me, forcing a scream from my lips. "No!" I tried pulling away, but the being was surprisingly strong. It pulled me closer, its faceless head leaning towards mine. Suddenly, a blinding light engulfed us. I could feel a pull, an energy being siphoned from me into the being. Fear gave me strength, and I yanked my hand away. The entity let out a distorted, electronic scream, staggering back. "I just want to be whole," it whimpered before dissolving into a cloud of distorted pixels, vanishing as swiftly as it had appeared. I fell to my knees, gasping for breath. My heart pounded in my ears, my mind spinning with the impossible reality I had just escaped. From that day forward, I stopped visiting the forum, stopped chasing the secrets of the metaphysical. Instead, I relished my reality, grateful for my face, my identity. The memory of my faceless friend lingers, a chilling reminder of the strange, terrifying abyss beyond our reality. And somewhere, in the expanse of the internet, the username Anon83 lay abandoned, a silent echo of a faceless friend that yearned for wholeness.
The missing time. My name is Oliver. Recently, I've been losing time, hours of memory vanishing into thin air, and the surrounding environment tells me I might be the cause of some horrific acts I have no recollection of. The first incident was the destruction of my living room. The second was the bloodied carcass of an animal left on my doorstep. The third, and most disturbing, was the shattered mirror and dried blood on my hands. I was terrified, clueless, and desperate for answers. To discover the truth, I purchased a high-quality camera, setting it up in my living room, intending to capture whatever was happening during my blackout periods. If I was causing these heinous acts, I needed to know. But what I found on that footage was beyond what I ever could have expected. After the first night of recording, I awoke in my kitchen, lying on the cold tile floor. I rushed to the camera, my heart pounding like a drum. Upon viewing the footage, my blood froze. The timestamp showed it was 1:37 a.m. when the room's temperature visibly dropped, my breath puffing out in cold, vaporous clouds. As I watched, my sleeping form stirred, then sat up abruptly on the couch. But it wasn't me. The way I moved was unnatural, jerky, like a puppet on broken strings. My eyes. They were wide, unblinking, and so terribly vacant. I felt the chill of fear creep up my spine. Suddenly, the camera shook violently as though caught in an earthquake. I watched in horror as my body on the screen rose, moving around the room with a demonic energy, trashing everything in sight. Then, abruptly, the room fell silent. My on-screen figure just stood there, immobile, head tilted at an unnatural angle. In my hand, there was a shiny object. A knife. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I saw it. A shadowy figure, emerging from the corner of the room. Its form was amorphous, a quivering mass of darkness. It approached me, its form seeming to absorb the feeble light around it. In the next moment, my on-screen figure began to convulse violently. Blood splattered onto the camera lens. The gruesome sight made my stomach churn. I was mutilating myself under the influence of that thing. Terrified, I fast-forwarded the footage. It showed me leaving the house, returning later with the lifeless body of a small animal. I set it down gently, almost respectfully, in front of that monstrous shadow, and then just collapsed on the floor. The shadow then seemed to consume the animal and my prostrated body. After a while, it simply dissolved into the room's darkness, leaving no trace of its existence. I stopped the footage, my mind reeling, a whirlpool of fear and confusion. Whatever was happening to me, it was horrifying. The more I uncovered, the less I wanted to know, but I had to dig deeper. I needed to understand, to stop this. Night after night, the footage showed the same gruesome routine. The shadowy figure. The self-mutilation. The strange sacrificial rituals. Each revelation was more horrifying than the last, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. In desperation, I reached out to paranormal investigators, but no one believed my story. They thought it was a well-orchestrated hoax, a desperate cry for attention. Alone and desperate, I decided to confront this entity myself. I set up the camera for the final time, fully prepared to confront my demonic tormentor. I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by symbols of protection I'd researched. I waited. And as the clock struck 1:37 a.m., the room turned frigid, my breath fogging in the air. The shadow appeared, and I felt my body lose control. As I convulsed, I fought back, shouting every banishment incantation I knew. The room seemed to shake with the force of my defiance. The entity, taken aback, started to recede. My body writhed in agony as I screamed the final words. Suddenly, a deafening silence filled the room, followed by an ear-splitting shriek as the entity vanished. The next morning, I woke up, battered and bruised, but with full memory of the night before. The camera still ran, its red light blinking steadily. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. The entity seemed to be gone, and with it, the terror of the missing time. But as I replayed the footage from last night, my heart sank. The camera had stopped recording right after the shadow appeared. There was no evidence of the confrontation, the fight, the banishment. Nothing. I was left with no proof, just the haunted memories of the missing time, the horrific scenes, and the terrifying entity. The missing time might be over, but but the fear of it returning, the dread of not knowing when or if it will strike again, keeps me in a perpetual state of horror. The camera now serves as a stark reminder of the chilling episodes and the unseen, unheard, unspeakable terror of the missing time.
The twin in the screen. Elliot was jolted awake in the middle of the night by the soft glow of his webcam indicator. It flickered in the dark like a lone lighthouse in an ocean of shadows. He squinted at it, puzzled. Hadn't he turned off his computer before bed? With a shrug, he covered the webcam with a sticky note and drifted back to sleep, blaming the incident on a software glitch. The next day, bleary-eyed and clutching his steaming coffee, Elliot opened his laptop. He was startled by an unsaved folder on his desktop, its appearance as unexpected as the webcam light last night. Intrigued yet apprehensive, he clicked on the folder. It contained a series of images, all dated from the previous night. Each image was titled with an exact timestamp, down to the second. His blood ran cold as he clicked on the first picture. It was him, or rather, a ghastly mirror image. His doppelganger was on the screen, his face trapped within the laptop's display. His eyes were wide, filled with a primal fear that made Elliot's heart pound in sympathy. He was pounding on the screen from the inside, his mouth open in a silent scream. Elliot shuddered. He looked almost like a ghost, his form shrouded in a sickly, pale light. The timestamp on the image was exactly the moment he had woken up and seen the webcam light on. The remaining pictures were all variations of the first, his other self trapped, panicked, screaming for help. The rational part of Elliot's mind revolted. This was absurd. Maybe it was a prank, or his imagination playing tricks. But the fear, the raw terror reflected in those images, it seemed too genuine to dismiss. That night, as Elliot lay in bed, he couldn't help but glance at the covered webcam. It remained dark, yet an uneasy anticipation lingered. He was asleep when it happened again. The webcam lit up, its unblinking eye fixed on the room. In the morning, Elliot, filled with dread, discovered another folder. More images, more timestamps, more fear. His digital twin was no longer merely screaming. He was clawing at the screen, the horror on his face escalating. Days turned into a week, each night a repetition of the one before. Each morning brought more haunting images. His doppelganger appeared to be losing strength, his desperation growing more poignant. His pleas grew more frantic as if he could feel his time running out. Elliot, now a shell of his former self, decided he'd had enough. He needed to understand what was happening. That night, instead of going to bed, he sat at his desk, eyes on the laptop. The webcam lit up. This time, he saw it. His screen flickered, and an eerie light enveloped the display. His mirror image phased into existence, once more trapped within the screen. He watched in terror as his doppelganger pounded on the screen, mouthing desperate pleas. Summoning all his courage, Elliot reached out towards the screen. His hand met the cold glass, but something felt wrong. It was vibrating, almost humming with a strange energy. A strange sense of curiosity overcame him, and he pressed harder. Suddenly, his hand sunk into the screen, as if it were a pool of water. Shocked, he tried to pull back, but something yanked him in. His surroundings warped around him, and he was in a world of blinding light. He felt a cold glass against his hands. He pounded on it, looking out into his room, but it was distorted, as if viewed through a fisheye lens. He was trapped inside the screen. Then, he saw himself, sitting at the desk, staring back at him with wide, terrified eyes. The new Elliot, oblivious to his screams, reached out towards the screen, only for his hand to sink in and disappear. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, the world flickered, and he was back in his room. The laptop sat closed on his desk, the webcam light ominously off. He opened the laptop, hesitated, and then clicked on the webcam app. There was nothing. No trapped twin, no screaming doppelganger. Just him, looking back at himself with relief. It seemed his ordeal was over, but he knew better. The other him, the one he'd seen screaming in those pictures, where was he now? Somewhere out there, Elliot knew another webcam was blinking on, and another twin was beginning to scream. The terror had not ended, it had only moved to another screen.
Virtual nightmare. I'm no stranger to horror games, having tested many over the years. But the email I received last week, an exclusive invitation to product test Reality's Edge, intrigued me more than usual. I skimmed the agreement and agreed to the unusual clauses, one of which stated the game utilized a revolutionary AI system that would learn from my fears. The first few levels were terrifying, but nothing I hadn't seen before. Gothic mansions, abandoned hospitals, forests shrouded in twilight. The AI proved impressive, adapting to my reactions, but it was still recognizably a game. Around level 8, things changed. I was in a simulation of my childhood home, a place the game couldn't possibly know. Unsettled, I navigated through the 2 familiar rooms. My long-dead dog, Rex, barked at the back door. My mother's voice echoed from the kitchen, the intonations perfect. The details were unnerving, but I chalked it up to some invasive data mining. Then I descended into the basement, a place I had been too afraid to venture into as a child. The memory of the damp smell, the chilling darkness, and the unknown that lurked in the shadows had kept me away. The game had recreated it with eerie accuracy. I wished I hadn't gone down. As I delved deeper into the shadows, I could hear the scurrying of unseen creatures. The game was utilizing my childhood fear, but it was becoming too real. I tried to exit, to pull the VR goggles off, but I couldn't. I was trapped in this virtual nightmare. In the corner of the room, there was a familiar childhood drawing taped to the wall, the one I had made after a particularly vivid nightmare, an abstract sketch of a creature I'd imagined lived in the basement. Now, in the flickering light of the game, the creature stirred. Its black eyes opened, filled with ancient malice, as it peeled itself from the sketch and solidified into a monstrous, tangible entity. "No," I whispered, too terrified to scream. The creature lunged. I braced myself for the familiar game over screen, but instead, I felt its claws tear into my virtual avatar. The pain was nauseatingly real, my screams echoing in the confined space. I ran, the game's usual controls replaced by my instinctual movements. I ran up the stairs, through the house, and out into the virtual sunlight. The creature hissed and withdrew into the basement, but the feeling of dread didn't subside. I tried again to disconnect, but it was still impossible. I felt trapped, like a rat in an all-too-realistic cage. Days morphed into weeks, each passing moment blending into a timeless nightmare. Hunger and thirst were relentless companions, the game mimicking them with disturbing accuracy. And every night, the creature left the basement, its dread-inducing presence pervading every corner of the house, reminding me I was never safe. During what I gauged as my 3rd week, I discovered an email terminal in the house. Desperate, I wrote an email to the developers, explaining my predicament. The reply came immediately. "Dear tester, we apologize for the inconvenience. However, disconnect is only possible once the game is completed. Face your fears, defeat the creature. Only then will you be released." I was a pawn in their sadistic experiment, it seemed, my fear their entertainment. But it also meant there was a way out. I needed to defeat the creature. Armed with this newfound hope, I scavenged for anything that could serve as a weapon and waited. As night fell, the familiar hissing echoed from the basement. I steeled myself. It was do or die. The battle was fierce. My weapon seemed to have little effect on the monster, but I managed to hold it at bay. In a moment of desperation, I grabbed the childhood drawing, now discarded on the floor, and shoved it into the creature's gaping maw. A deafening roar filled the air, the creature convulsed, then exploded into 1,000 scraps of paper, each one bearing a fragment of the creature's monstrous image. A wave of exhaustion swept over me, and as my vision blurred, a single word floated before my eyes: congratulations. Then darkness took over. When I came to, the VR goggles were lying next to me, the real-world light piercing my eyes. I was free. Reality's Edge was slated for release later that year, but I declined any further involvement. I had learned something invaluable, something terrifying. Sometimes, the monsters from our childhood, the ones we hide and try to forget, are the most dangerous ones of all, even in a virtual world.
Thank you for watching, and remember, the darkness awaits. Until our paths cross again, stay fearful and stay subscribed.